So what did happen with this wilderness bill as it moved up from the U.S. House into the U.S. Senate, and how did you propel it forward?
Well, at that time in 1984, when we finally got the bill introduced in the Senate from a friendly Democratic senator, the Senate had been captured by the Republicans. And as a result, the Republicans were chairs of all of the important committees. The wilderness bill, since it dealt with national forest, fell under the Agriculture Committee. The Forest Service is under the Department of Agriculture. Well, the chair of the Agriculture Committee was North Carolina's own Senator Jesse Helms.
A notorious figure.
A notorious figure, very conservative senator who did not like the idea of wilderness. His son or son-in-law, I believe, was a forester who worked with the National Forest and with timber industries. And Helms was quoted in local media as saying that wilderness was a sore spot on the landscape. So we knew we had a challenge because he ran the committee, and we had to get this out of his committee if it had a chance to pair up with the House and be reconciled. So Helms called a congressional hearing on the North Carolina Wilderness Bill, but he dismissed the larger Agriculture Committee, and he went to the subcommittee on National Forest and basically moved aside the chair of that subcommittee, and he chaired it himself alone. No other member of the committees were with him in a small room. And I was invited to testify on the panel in support of the bill, along with two other environmental groups.
So just so I have the picture here, this is Jesse Helms in a room in DC, and then whoever's testifying on behalf of the bill, it's just him. He's had the subcommittee and the broader committee not even there. It's just him and
Correct.
you and a few other people testifying.
Correct. We were all at the same long table. He's sitting at the end of it. I'm sitting to his immediate right at his elbow at the corner. The others were arrayed around the table. He was the only member of the Senate there. He had his aide with him.
So you have to win him over at this moment.
Well, I presented my testimony. He listened very closely. When I finished, he began the following colloquy with me. He said, "Now, Dr. Cox," and he said, "Is that correct? You're a doctor?" I said, "Yes, Senator." He said, "That's because you are a professor at, let me see, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill." And I said, "Yes, Senator." He said, "Chapel Hill, that liberal university, and it's a state university, so you're being paid by the state of North Carolina." "Yes, Senator, my salary is through the state university." He says, "So you're using public taxpayer money to come up here and lock up parts of our national forests that are going to throw loggers out of work out in Swain County and the other counties in the western part of the state." And I said, "Senator, I don't believe we're going to throw them out of work. May I share with you a report that has just emerged from your alma mater, North Carolina State University?" And he paused and sat back. And I had just been given, before flying up to DC, a cost-benefit study of the effect of designating areas in Western North Carolina as federal wilderness areas by an economist at NC State. I presented the report. The report basically said the only other treatment of those areas of the forest that would generate more income for those counties would be to turn the national forest all into Christmas tree growing farms of a monoculture of spruce trees. And we're not going to do that. Wilderness does generate an economic benefit greater than logging because of the tourism, the fishing, the hunting, the campers, the recreational uses. People come from all over the state and other states to enjoy the wilderness experience. They're spending money on hotels and restaurants and gas stations and buying curios and gifts. And so here's the report. At that point, his aides started scribbling notes to refute me and handing them to the senator. And to Senator Helms' credit, and he was often a gracious man, he waved his aide off and asked for a copy of the report, and then went on to another witness in the testimony. And so he let me off the hook at that point. So what then happened is that the committee went into a markup session, and the other senators on the Agriculture Committee supported the bill, but they would defer to the chair of the committee whose state it was. And a Democratic senator from Tennessee, I believe, said, "Senator Helms, what say ye?" And Helms paused for a moment and then waved his arm and said, "Let it pass, let it go through."
Victory.
And I'll tell you, one reason for that was after the committee testimony I presented, Helms asked one question. He said, "How many members do you have in North Carolina?" And I said, "Around 5,000. He said, "I think I heard from every one of them 3 times."
That was that right timing at that markup point, wasn't it?
We had mobilized and intervened at the moment we needed. So from there, it went to the full Senate. It was approved and reconciled with the House, and President Reagan signed it into law in June 1984 as the North Carolina Wilderness Act.